Hiya, this is Information Systems, and we're going to kick it off with P1 and P2. They're very interlinked, so it's quite hard to separate them. So let's go through it. I'm going to give you 2 weeks to complete P1 and P2. Also going to include M1 and D1, but you don't have to complete those yet. And I'll probably go through those with you individually. So this presentation is going to be about P1 and P2, which is how organizations use their information and what makes their information useful or not useful or good or not good and so on. So let's go through why they would do that, why they use information and how they process it and transform it, and what do they do this for. So there's quite a bit to include here, and there's quite a bit of writing. There is a book to help you do that, but I don't want you to copy the book. I want you to use your own examples. So we're going to look at the types of information, the sources of information, which areas of the company use that information, how it moves across the company, and what makes information good. But before we do all that, let's just talk about the raw data. So I've got some numbers on the screen. That could be literally anything. That data there could be anything at all. Without a clear context of what that information is, we just don't know. It could be people's ages. It could be how many biscuits they've eaten. It could be their shoe size. It could be how many TVs they own. We just have no idea. So without knowing what your data is and where it's come from, it's not got that much value. You might all remember from your maths or not remember from your maths. There are two types of information. You've got quantitative and qualitative. So quantitative data is measurable data. So you can measure sales, you can measure product dimensions, you can measure logistic distances, you can measure outgoings and incomings. Anything measurable, that's quantitative data, a quantity. On the other hand, equally useful but totally different is qualitative data, and that's people's opinions. So you might leave a review, this new iPhone is amazing, it's really fast, it's sleek, it's just fantastic to use, it's got a brilliant screen. That's opinions, it's qualitative data, and it's very valuable to a company to know what people think about their products, but it's not quantifiable, in the same way that hard numbers are. And then there's the question of gathering your data. Is that company collecting its own information? Is it doing its own surveys? Is it first-hand data? First-hand data is very reliable because the company has collected it itself. It knows where it's come from. It knows all the history of gathering that data. It might be the company's making observations. It might be they're conducting experiments. It could be all sorts of things, but they are directly getting that information. In contrast, secondary data is data where they've got the information from somewhere else external. That could be the government. The government do large surveys and they might look at the government data. They hire companies to collect and do research for them. They might get it from competitors, or they might get it from other sources that might be more or less trustworthy. So secondary data is not as trustworthy, but it might come in larger volumes. than primary data because there's larger sources of information. So it's about balancing what you get and what you use and what you're using it for. So why do you need all this information and data when you have a company or you're part of a company? One of the main things is operational support. And operational support is the day-to-day operational running of your company. If the supplier's price goes up, do you need to put your sale price up? If staff wages go up, how does it affect you? As things change in the company and you're responding to the environment, you've got to change how you do things. So being on top of your data and making sure things are running smoothly allows you to respond appropriately. And that's through analysing your data. You're drilling down into your data, trying to find patterns in your data, trying to find connections and things in your data. And they use a lot of AI to do that now, to see correlations. Why is the sales at this time of day dipping or something like that? There might be reasons for it in the local community. Decision making. You might need to make decisions about your business. You might want to expand. You might want to move to a new building. You might want to have a different product line. You might want to make cutbacks. You can't just do these things willy-nilly. You've got to try and base them on some evidence that the changes are going to be effective. And the last thing is you need to try and gain an advantage in the global or local marketplace. Your company probably has competitors, and if you can streamline your processes, streamline your production, streamline your delivery, have good systems internally for managing staff and things like that, then you can be more efficient and effective and maybe cheaper, or provide a better quality service. So it all leads to basically keeping your company competitive in that market. Otherwise you could go bankrupt. Companies need this inflow of information. One of these things they use are electronic point of sale systems. So the electronic tills can gather information about sales, and that can be analysed almost in real time. You know, you can look at stock levels, and you can look at when people purchase and when they don't purchase and what type of products they purchase, and you can collect a lot of information to help you make decisions. And to make your decisions, you're going to analyse the things you do. You try and analyse if there are any patterns or trends. Does this keep happening, or does that happen because of this? And what's affecting your product? The price of semiconductors might affect the profit margin of one of your components or something like that. And if you're aware of these things, you can try and mitigate that by having different multiple suppliers or things like that put in place. And you're going to try and benchmark yourself against other businesses in that industry. Predicting your sales, a company needs to know if it's getting a surplus of stock or whether its sales are decreasing. Like with COVID, shops like Marks and Spencer's have just moved 75% of its business to online because footfall fell in its physical shops, so it had to do something. And shops are all companies are trying to constantly make sure they're staying on top of things, predicting what's going to happen. So companies need to make lots of decisions, and they need to do this broadly speaking, in three ways. Operationally, that's the day-to-day things that happen on a small scale that needs to be done. So it could be one of the shops has a little sale or something like that, or maybe there's a flood in part of the shop and they need to move some stuff, or it could be all sorts of stuff like that. Maybe there's a local lockdown in that area. So little things like that, the shop needs to, or company needs to respond to it there and then. Tactical decisions have more thought put into them, and it involves more of the company getting involved. It might be they're going to redecorate a whole supermarket, remodernize it, make it look better, or something like that. It's going to be quite a fairly big change. Might not affect the whole chain of shops, but it's certainly going to be not something that's going to happen in a day. Whereas the strategic decisions, they're really large decisions that tend to affect the whole company. So it might be new premises, new buildings. It could be a mass redundancy. It could be a change of supplier, or new product line, or something quite big, or new policies that are coming into your company, or something like that. You might want to become ethically sourced, something like that, or you might want to change the public opinion of your company with a different marketing campaign. So these are strategic things you do for a long-term advantage, a long-term change, to try and change perception of your company or its operating procedures. I've already talked about gaining an advantage. So yeah, a company needs to try and maintain its position in the market, or increase its position in the market, or enter into another market to try and make itself effective and cost effective and turn a profit. And markets are always changing. Different things happen, different companies lose out, different other companies appear. So it's a very fluid thing, and companies need the information to try and stay afloat. So the next part of this is the different areas within a company itself. So think of a large company like Tesco. It's got different parts of that company. So it'll have a HR section, and they will look after all their employees. They will track their personal details and pay and holidays and training and all that sort of stuff. Then you might have a marketing team who make TV adverts and billboards and advertising on buses and magazine placements and stuff like that. Then you've got maybe product development, who actually test out new products for the shop. You might have teams that sell stuff at the actual shop floor. You might have an admin team who answer all inquiries and stuff like that. They're all within the company. They're all functional areas of the company. And we also need external areas as well. So the government is one of them. So the government will provide details on legislation, like health and safety, taxes, maybe there's changes due to coronavirus, anything like that. The government will pass this legislation to the company, and the company has to implement that. There are research groups, so companies will do research for other companies and so on like that. So these external companies will also interact with your company. And these different areas, they all handle and pass information from one area to another area. So you know, like administration might store customer data and so on, data about who's where and when, and timetables and schedules, and they'll, you know, be the backbone of the company in terms of what's happening where and when, and so on. Finance, they'll have all the information about all the sales and the costings and the business premises and the taxes, and they'll be able to produce reports and pass that to other areas to know how they're performing in terms of revenue. So each of these areas not only generates information itself, but it also passes it to the other areas sometimes. I want you to think of your own ideas when you write about this. So you don't have to do the ones included here. You could think of your own functional area like warehousing or something, and just write what type of information would they deal with. And then when you've got this information in the company, it can move about within that company. Different levels of management will have the information. So it might be people on the shop floor, they're all saying something about, you know, the aisles are too narrow, customers are complaining, and they may tell their managers, and when they have big meetings of all the managers, they all get together and they say, oh yeah, I'm getting this problem, and they'll say we're getting the same problem, and then it'll get escalated up to the senior management, who might then implement something. And likewise, senior management might come one day and say, you know, we're going to be more eco-friendly, we're going to save paper, and they'll say to the management, I want you to tell all your staff that they can only print 5 sheets of paper a day. And then the managers tell their staff, and so on. And it comes down through that management chain. And things can also go across as well. You know, if there's a manager doing a spreadsheet and it's really effective, they might pass that on to other managers so they can use similar spreadsheets, and so on. So it goes across ways as well. The last part of this is what makes information good. What is it about it that makes information good and useful? So valid information. This is whether the information you can get is verifiable. Is it accurate? Is it realistic? You know, is it appropriate? If you went into a computer room at college and there were 10 boys who love computing, and asked them about their favourite computer games, you would probably leave with a certain impression of certain games might be good. But if you went into a primary school and asked the same question, you would get a different answer. So, hopefully. So, if you want a representative view, you might have to go to different places and ask a larger cross-section of people or something. You don't want it biased by the particular sample you're taking. If you just ask, you know, if you ask 10 people in McDonald's if they like Coke, then they're probably, quite a few of them might say yeah, you know, or do you like burgers? Yeah, probably. You know, if you ask 10 people in Pizza Hut, do they like pizzas? They're probably going to say yeah. So it's about it being valid. Reliable is similar in a way, but do you trust where that data's come from? So, you know, if you asked your mate to ask your mate to find you something out, how trustworthy is that in the end? You know, is it reliable? Where's, you know, they just made it up? You know, if you get 10 students to go and collect you some data and pay them to go and find something out, and they come back, you know, did they really find it out, or did they just write it down? You don't know, do you? So, you know, reliability is a big thing. Timely. So when you get your information, you need to get it quickly. If there's going to be a new iPhone released, or any phone for that matter, all the specs of it are released, say your company makes phone cases, you need to be like making them immediately. You can't wait until it's out a few weeks. As soon as you know about it, you need to start your product development and get it going so that it's available at launch. If you manufacture some computer components, and a machine shop in China goes into lockdown and you can't get your components, then you need to know about that immediately so you can source different suppliers. So you need to know information as fast as possible. Knowing later on, it's too late. Is the information fit for purpose? Gathering one sort of data, you buy this data because it's cheap, but you need to try and use it for something it's not meant to before. It might not fit with what you want to do with it. Accessibility of the information. So you might collect lots of scientific data. Can you process it properly to get the most from it? Do you have access to tools? Are you specialists in data processing? Do your employees have the skills to process it? Do you have the computing power and equipment to process it, or the software? How easy is it going to be to process this data? There's no point getting 20 terabytes of data if you can't really do anything with it, So it has to be accessible to you. And likewise, it needs to be cost effective. If you're paying £1 million for this data and you produce a product that ends up selling £30,000 worth of stuff, it's not been worth it getting the data in the first place. So you need to get the data, but the data shouldn't cost more than what you're going to gain from it. Is the data accurate enough? So this would be like the Hubble telescope giving you loads of data about something, and you're trying to prove something with it. Is the data actually accurate enough to do that? So relevance. So again, very similar. There's no point having the information if it's not useful to you. It's got to be the right sort of information that you can use and have the right sort of level of detail. The source of information, that's like reliability. Understandable by the user. That's a little bit like accessibility, but it could also include what you're going to do with it at the end. If you've got all this data and you make these complex charts with it and tables of data, when you pass that on to managers and for people to use, can they actually use that information, what they've been given? Information probably needs to be broken down into really key points that have clear messages to make it useful. Not going to really go on much more, but for a merit, you're going to make a flow chart, and it's not going to be like this that's in the book. It's basically an extension of this, of the functional areas. I'll talk to you about it individually if you want to do it, but basically in a nutshell, what you have to do is you're going to pick a company and you're going to pick 3 functional areas of that company. It could be like HR, sales, warehousing, and you have to put on your diagram those areas, what information they generate and what information they pass to those other areas. And then you need 2 external areas like the government and research companies linking into it, passing information along. And it's just a diagram, there's no writing. You'll find it very difficult to find anything on the internet for that. And the last part is the, so there's a bit more there, some ideas. And the last part is D1, which is an extension of this. So this is about the characteristics of information. D1 is about how can a company improve these things. So I'll be looking for some examples. So how could a company make their data more valid? How could a company make their information more timely or reliable or accessible? I mean, accessible is a fairly good one to do. Like they could train the staff, they could purchase software, they could hire other companies to do it for them, and so on. So it's about what could a company do to improve the quality of their information. So that's D1. So that covers everything. So back to here. You've got 2 weeks. P1 and P2, you need to include everything on this slide. I'm available for help when you come in, available in video chat, email, contact me if you need any more explanations or help. There is that book, but you must not copy it, and you must give your own examples. And I'll see you later.